Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 1, and today we are on Episode 4, titled Dogs. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Episode 4.
Carmi and Richie cater a kid's birthday party. Tina and Sydney work together while Marcus makes donuts.
I love the little ending. And Marcus makes donuts.
It's accurate. Okay. He's kind of own little world, just happily making donuts.
Yes. Like time is not passing in his happy little world. Oh, it's the best. Falk occasionally invades his peaceful quiet to just be an age chaos.
Yeah. For laughter and fun.
Yes. Okay, so our episode titles of choice for Episode 4. What was yours?
Mine is Ecto Cooler.
That's so great. Mine is Ecto Chill.
Yes.
Oh, we were on the same wavelength today, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a great scene. Let's dive right into our thoughts on Episode 4. What did you think of this episode? What stood out to you?
It's so fun and so funny and utterly ridiculous. And I really appreciate how this show has kind of shifted the moments of peace and serenity and the moments of chaos. Because in this episode, there are moments with Marcus primarily in the kitchen where it's so serene and peaceful and wonderful. And you're just like, I can breathe. I just want to hang out with Marcus as he's creating donuts. That's just a great day. And then the main source of stress and tension is at the birthday party with Carmi and Richie and Cicero. And it's just wild how you go through these tonal shifts from peaceful and serene to tense with Sydney and Tina and stressful but also hilarious with Richie and Carmi, and you're just floating through all of these different tones and all of these different scenarios with these big personalities, and yet it's entertaining and it's fun and you just love spending time with these characters. I'm so impressed with how this show is constructed and how smart and witty it is and how the pacing is just spot on so that you continue to stay engaged. You continue to just want more of this.
Yeah, I think this is the funniest episode yet. And the previous episodes are funny and they're entertaining and there's really great moments of humor and some great lines. But generally it's purely through dialogue and through some of the situations that are happening within the kitchen, right? And in this episode, the world expands. We get to see our fun, wonderful little characters in different situations now. And it makes for some really great like visual humor and just different types. I think your point is really great around there's almost these 3 parallel tracks that we're traveling on, and each one is a different tone and a different mood, and we kind of bounce between all of them, and that structure is different from some of our previous episodes up until now, where generally the fam is together, the crew is together. We might break off and visit each of them in these little pockets, but we see them like kind of ebb and flow within the same time and place, or one of the characters really goes off on its own side adventure. And in this one, I feel like they almost break off into pairs, and we get to visit each of them, but they don't come together till the very end of the episode. So it's just a different structure, and we get to see a little bit more, especially of Carmi and Richie's world beyond just the kitchen, and that was pretty neat. We learned some things about them.
Yeah, we learn quite a bit about them and their families and how they react to each other too. Like I love I love those scenes, especially between Richie and Uncle Jimmy. Uh, I think those are so spot on, so hilarious because so much is happening in that one conversation, and you go on a roller coaster ride within one conversation between the two of them. And so just for the writing to be so strong and also understand these characters well enough to craft that type of communication, I think is really impressive.
And you see how different the way that Uncle Jimmy interacts with Carmy versus Uncle Jimmy interacts with Richie, and they are such
Yeah.
foils to each other. And I think that's one thing that's like fascinating about the show is that it's able to develop these characters so quickly, so efficiently because they are using scenes to develop both characters at the same time. And it's actually the way that they interact with each other that you learn so much about them. You know, like in other shows or film, we see our characters in situations and then we learn about them based on how they react to situations. And this show is able to efficiently do this with so many characters at the same time because of that colliding of them amongst each other and how they interact with each other. It brings out different sides and colors of them. And you see that really well depicted through the way that Carmen interacts with Jimmy, the way that Richie interacts with Uncle Jimmy, and then the way that they interact with each other. It's this perfect way to bring out all their different sides really coming to fruition.
And it's so smart because the situations that they find themselves in are simple. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's cater a kid's birthday party. It's make the potatoes. It's make a donut. Like
Yeah.
that is the action that we're doing. And then it's just the characters being themselves that make that so interesting. And I think the show is so smart to understand that we need simplicity somewhere. So we're going to make the situation simple, but then that
Mm-hmm.
will give us really explore these characters and focus on them because they're doing this really simple thing in kind of a ridiculous way.
And then there's something about the simplicity of it too that feels so resonant for us as the audience because we've all been in those situations. You know, like the way that Carmy and Richie fight with each other. We've all been in a situation like that where you're just getting on each other's nerves. Whether you know you've seen married couples do this, you do this with your friends when you have to do a run an errand together. That's kind of difficult and confusing, and you're both out of patience. You know, and neither of you want to do it, but you're like having to bite your tongue and just go in these situations. You know, like they take these real life everyday types of scenarios that we as the viewers have been in and can like make them more colorful, make them more interesting with these characters. But those feelings that they experience, those ways that they fight and bicker together, we've all been in those. We've all been in those.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good. And it's also hilarious. I one of my favorite there's so many good moments in this episode, but one of my favorites is when they arrive at Uncle Jimmy's house and the way that that shot is framed with Richie and Jimmy just yelling at each other and then Carmy is just
Yep.
standing there in the middle holding a box and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, Carmy, I get it, man. Like I feel you. We've all been there where people are just like yelling at each other and upset, and you're like, I'm just here to do a job. So it's in those little things. They use empathy in these ridiculous situations to make them even more hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And I love that there's a hard cut that happens from Carby in the car telling Richie, like, just please don't
Yeah.
bring it up. You know, like, and you get the feeling, and you know, as a viewer, this has happened a million
Hmm.
times beforehand. There is a sense of history and, you know, familiarity and the way that this family has just, you know, been with each other so many times. And Carmi's seen this dynamic play out a million times. And hard cut too. And it happens again. Here we are. Oh, it's so great. So great. He was warned. He did not take up him up on the warning.
Yes. Yes. And I also appreciate that this like them doing this birthday party isn't out of the goodness of their hearts. You know, this is not something that they are wanting to do as a favor for a family member. They are doing this because they owe Uncle Jimmy a lot of money.
Yeah,
so there's
300,000.
also this tension and these stakes with this birthday party, and you understand like, oh, this needs to go well because kind of their entire future is in Uncle Jimmy's hands. And so I appreciate that element to it too, like where Carmi is like, okay, I am a professional, I am doing this, I'm going to make this money, and I'm going to try and save this business. And Richie is out here just being like, nah, I do what I want. I'm going to pick a fight if I want to pick a fight. Like, I think that juxtaposition is also really interesting and just heightens those stakes that are already set in this episode.
Yeah. You just see how volatile Richie is, you know, like he cannot be contained. And he acts on his whim and on his impulses. And you see then multiply that out to how the kitchen is run, and you're like, oh, I understand why the kitchen was run that way. Like, we don't need order, we don't need chaos, we don't need structure and discipline. It's not what Richie's about. We go with the flow, we figure it out, and we run by the seat of our pants, which is why that whole episode 2, was it episode 2 when the inspector comes, like we're like, yeah, this is consistent, this makes sense, I get why things are not run the right way, and there's holes in the wall, like, and we fill them with whatever we can find, you know. It all feels consistent too, which is really satisfying for us as a viewer.
Yeah. And then the Xanax enters the room.
Oh my goodness. Well, my favorite part of that whole scene is that Uncle Jimmy's like, you know, I don't hate it.
Right? Oh, it's so good.
That is character revealing too, of who you are as a person, Uncle Jimmy. Just chilling. Thank gosh.
Well, and I love the buildup of it too, because Carmi's like, he's doing his thing, he's just trying to hold it together, and you also see the hints of like Pete is really tired too, and all of that. This is all happening kind of at the same time, and then Carmi goes to like change the cooler, and he finds the Xanax bottle, and so again, you're like, oh my gosh, this is such high stakes, and all of these children at this birthday party have just been drugged. Oh no, what is Uncle Jimmy going to do? Is he going to shut down the restaurant? Is he going to destroy Carmi completely? Like, what is going to happen now? And then Uncle Jimmy is like, yeah, dude, this is great. It's so funny and just completely defies all expectations for where you might think that this story is heading.
And there's these really foreboding shots beforehand of like kids drinking their little drinks too, you know, like there's a quick series of you know, just quick shots cutting back and forth between many people taking swigs of their drink, and their tiny little bodies are just taking it in. There's also a quick shot of the empty bottle open on the table, and you're like, oh no, oh no. That plus these shots of the kids drinking, oh no. So you're waiting for a while actually for them to realize, and that's kind of fun, is like we know as the viewers what has happened, and we're waiting for our characters to discover what they've done.
Yeah, it's that whole like Hitchcock theory about tension is you show the audience the bomb, but you don't let the characters know. So then the audience is stressed the whole time. Yep. That's exactly what this episode does with a bottle of Xanax.
A bomb, a bottle of Xanax, same difference.
Same thing.
What I also love about that whole sequence is that we get to learn a lot about Carmi too, because the minute he's the one that gets to discover the empty bottle in the cooler. My question is like, oh, it's going to be really interesting what he does as a character, as a human being. What's his reaction? You know, like, is he quickly find Richie and figure, like, what do we do? Like, does he try to cover it up? And I love that his first reaction is to be so forthright with Uncle Jimmy, who's standing right there, to be like, hey, I know you might get mad, but this is what happened. You know, like his first gut reaction is to be honest about it. And I thought that was telling for who Carmi is as a human person. I think Richie in that situation might have taken a different approach, or some other character might have taken a different approach and tried to figure out a way to solve for it or freak out more. And he's calm, but he's honest. And I thought that was very telling for who this character is.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting that he doesn't find Richie and chew him out. You know, like you think that discovery would be great fodder for an explosive moment between the two of them. And the show doesn't go there. And he, like you said, he just finds Uncle Jimmy and is like, hey, this is what happened. Please don't like murder me. And then Uncle Jimmy is cool. I really appreciate the ways that this episode in particular subverts expectations, you know, where you think it would go one way, then it chooses to go a different way. And it really keeps you on your toes because these characters are responding in ways that might seem maybe a little counterintuitive, but make total sense for the character. So I appreciate that variety because we are not consistent all the time as human beings, and we react sometimes in unexpected ways. And so I feel like this show understands human nature enough to lead us down this path where characters might be defying expectations, but it still makes sense.
And I think it makes for a lot of fun, and each episode like feels satisfying, like I think we talked about in the last episode review. And I think that's what makes it satisfying. You know, like we feel that element of surprise is so satisfying to be like, oh, I was wrong, but like this also does make sense. You know, like that is such a gratifying experience. Yeah. Should we talk about Sydney and Tina?
Yeah, sure.
I've been waiting for Tina to come onto the scene, and this is the episode where we get to, yeah. Talking about subverting expectations, I think the show's done an interesting job over the last, 2-3 episodes, like really portraying the Tina that stirs the pot, the Tina that's spicy and can dole it out, and is a little bit more antagonistic towards Sydney. Like we've seen little tiny comments that she'll make, all this kind of stuff. And by the end of this episode, we get to see this really tender side of Tina. You know, her little smile as she receives that grace and that it's great from Sydney, I thought was so subtle and yet meant so much for who we know this character to be. Like that little her turning around to say thank you, chef, to Sydney. Oh, it warmed my little heart so much. And I think it's in contrast to everything else that we've learned about who this character is so far, that meant a lot for this character. Whereas maybe coming from someone like Marcus or Ibra, who has been so clearly sweet and endearing, it's a little bit different, and it carries so much weight coming from Tina specifically. So I thought they nailed the emotional tones of that shifting throughout this episode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so good. And I love that moment when she finally says thank you to Sydney, because she initially says thank you, Jeff, and then she corrects herself to chef. And in the first episode, Carmi had talked about, I call everyone chef as a sign of respect. And throughout the entire show so far, Tina hasn't called anybody chef. She's always called Carmi Jeff. And now, instead of saying this joking way of thank you, Jeff, to Sydney, she is actually saying, no, thank you, chef. So I love that character moment. And it also harkens back to earlier in the seasons where Carmi had talked about that. So she's paying attention to things, and she's aware of what she's doing and aware of what's going on. So then when she makes that choice to finally say, thank you, chef, it contains so much more meaning.
Mm-hmm. And it's paying off that setup that happened earlier, that detail. It's rewarding us for paying attention and realizing the stakes of what that line means. And the other thing that I love about the way that that sequence is constructed is that thank you, chef, comes later than we expect. It's a few moments after, and we see her little smile, and like honestly, it's satisfying enough to be like, oh yeah, like that meant a lot to
Mm-hmm.
her. And then she turns around, and so that pacing, we thought that the scene was over. We thought that the satisfaction came, the sequence's catharsis moment came, but no, there's actually more, and that is thrilling. That is exciting, and it really contributes to that scene feeling even more satisfying than it already would have with Tina's little smile and kind of acknowledgement of the moment. So the way that the scene continues to escalate and get more layered was really great.
And I love that even though this episode reveals a lot about Tina, we also learn a lot about Sydney too. Um, just in her actual leadership style and the way that she is so steady. She's kind of like almost like channeling her inner Marcus in this episode, where every time Tina's being a jerk to her, she is still like, okay, I'm still here. When Tina messes up the cream or whatever, Sydney just steps in,
Oh,
does it,
yes.
doesn't need to say anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Sydney is so steady in this, and you just see her like, I don't care if you don't like me. I'm still going to try and kill you with kindness, and I'm still going to do my job. So you can be as big of a jerk as you want, but we're going to get this done. And I just loved seeing that leadership and that like fortitude from Sydney, that she wasn't going to be flapped by Tina at all. And then you see in the end, Tina is actually the one that comes around to her. It's so satisfying for both characters.
Mm-hmm. And it's the perfect payoff for everything that we just experienced in the previous episode. Like it is so well constructed for these to be back to back. One, we get to see the parallels between Sydney's hard day in the previous episode and then Tina's having basically a very similar day where just like you're beating yourself up because you can't do anything right. Nothing is going according to plan. You're frustrated and you're kind of taking it out on everyone, and so they've changed roles. Tina is now in the role that Sydney was in. And you get to then see the way that Sydney has now employed all of the things that she's learned and realized and articulated with Carmi at the end of the last episode, and she's putting into practice in this episode. She is not going to create a culture that chews you out when you mess up or breaks down your spirit when you are, at the bottom. She gets to finally create that culture that her and Carmi were talking about with the type of place they want to steward and the type of kitchen environment and team dynamic that they want to steward that is not toxic like the one that they've experienced in the past. And I love that you get to see like immediately, will Sydney, did she learn those new things, and is it going to come to fruition? And I love that this comes almost like the answer to the previous episode.
Mm-hmm. And it's also wonderful to see that the other characters in the kitchen, the other people in the kitchen, also recognize that. There's that one line that Ibra says to Sydney, not about Tina, but he says to her, "You've given Marcus a lot of confidence. Well done."
Yes.
And so you just see the way that the other members of the team are also rallying around her and supporting her and encouraging her so that she is able to continue to create this healthier culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a little line that happens in passing, but it just does feel like such a continuation of that encouragement that she needs, and then she's able to pour out and give to Tina as well. I can't wait to learn more about Ibra. He's on my list of next episodes that I hope to see more about who these characters are. He's fascinating human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all so interesting, and their dynamics are so fun. And I even love the way that they have kind of like divvied up the characters in this episode. And I think they really highlight each other's differences and create some unique challenges for the character pairs. So it's so strategic the way that they've laid this episode out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting because each of the characters, when they are with different people, bring out different sides of them. You know, like we talked about that earlier with Uncle Jimmy and Carmi and Richie. But you get to also see that too with Sydney and Tina's dynamic, and the way that Sydney interacts with Tina is so different from the way that Sydney interacts with Marcus. So, like, these different sides of her are getting brought out by these different dynamics, and this is the way that we interact as human beings. Like, we kind of respond to and interact with the energy and the vibe that other people bring, and it brings out different sides of us as well.
So can we talk about Marcus and his donuts?
Yes. I mean, it just felt like moments of rest and respite for the chaos of the rest of the episode. I feel like his chocolate cake and his donut making have its own little narrative arc throughout the course of this episode. Tell me your thoughts about
Oh my
Marcus.
gosh. Yes. It's so fun to see him kind of blossom and like taking a more prominent space in these episodes. Like I feel like in the first one or two he was like really kind of behind the scenes and you would just see him pop up every once in a while, but now like we're really seeing him and like what motivates him and what he's passionate about and just like who he is as a person. Is just so fun to see. And like we talked about in the last episode, he has such a different personality from all of the others in the kitchen who have these really big dominant personalities, and Marcus is just kind of steady, just making his donuts. And I love that his part in this episode is, like you said, it's rest, it's respite, but it's also just so fun and creative too, you know, especially when Fact comes in and they start like squishing the donuts and doing their donut research, and Fact is comparing the donut to the toilet seat cover on grandma's toilet, you know, like all of these moments, they're so fun and funny and lighthearted, which is just such a great way to break up all of the tension that's happening elsewhere in the kitchen. It's just, it's so fun. I was so excited every time we got to spend time with Marcus and his donuts. It's great.
Yes, it's so good. And this is in my looking ahead section, but for Marcus's arc, I feel like they're really planting lots of seeds of kind of his vision and his desire to hone his craft and to be great. Like, he's, out of all of the different chefs that we've seen in the kitchen so far in this group, he's the one that's almost got this creative spark and this ambition to be great. He's the one that's most interested in Carmi's journey in the past through like the best of the best in the food industry. He's really studying, like doing his research. Like, he's so methodical about his approach to wanting to get better and hone his craft. So I feel like they're potentially seeding, I don't know, this interesting narrative arc for Marcus on his journey as a chef specifically, more so than like any of the other characters that I think have different arcs. But there's this ambition that we get to see that he has, that he's pursuing, and Sydney is helping also create space and give him the resources to be able to explore and nurture that ambition in him. You know, like there's that one little scene where he's like, hey, I want to explore these things. I don't have the tools that I need for it. And Sydney's like, don't worry, like submit the request. Let's figure out how to make it happen. We don't have it now, but we'll see what we can do. And you see his excitement from that, where he gets to explore and play with different tools that he needs. So just, yeah, there's like a ambitious spark in him that wants to master his craft, which I think is kind of a budding storyline that's been developing over the past couple episodes.
And it's really fun to see how him and Sydney kind of play off of each other in that, because she's like a couple steps ahead of him, maybe a lot of steps ahead of him, I don't know, but she's ahead of him and has kind of been where he's at and is using what she can to equip him to like take those next steps forward. And you see that kind of like fueling of each other's like creativity almost, and helping each other develop that spark and that love for their craft. And I really enjoy seeing those moments between them, because they just interact so well, the way that they encourage and then reinforce each other's dreams.
Oh, it's so heartwarming. It's so heartwarming. I love it. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see, yeah, what they continue to do with Marcus. We've gotten a lot more of him over the past 2-3 episodes, so he feels like a budding storyline that they're going to hopefully continue to play out. We shall see.
We shall see indeed.
Any other thoughts about episode 4 before we give out some awards?
Can we just talk about some of the dialogue in this episode? Obviously, we're going to have our spiciest line award in a little bit, but I think there are some non-spicy lines that are just so damn good that I would like to highlight.
Love it.
So there's the moment at the birthday party where Richie pulls out his Xanax and he says, "I suffer from anxiety and dread." And Carmi's response, without missing a beat, is, "Who doesn't?" So that is absolutely hilarious. At one point, Fack is wearing a shirt that says "The Coach" on it, and he's wearing that while they are inspecting the donuts. And I think that that's just a really funny little juxtaposition.
Oh, well, he has that line in that scene where he's comparing the donut's texture to his grandma's toilet cover.
It's so good. It smells like potpourri and grandma. It's like, oh my gosh.
He also has that line at the end of like, best friend, something along the line. I don't remember the exact line, but it's like best friends eat cake together or something like that.
Yeah, we all get cake because we're best friends. It's just the perfect line for him to end on. And then the other line that I thought was really funny was when Pete was drugged in the car with Carmi and Richie, and they have just been like talking crap about Pete the whole time. Nobody likes Pete. He's the literal worst. And then Pete, while drugged, is just like, "Thank you for letting me be part of this family." And we're like, nobody wants you to be part of this family, but okay.
I love in the scene that Richie's just like, "Get the F off of me," and just like shoves him over to Carmi. And I love that Carmi's just like, their dynamic is Carmi's just like, "All right, yeah, I'll take it. It's easier than having to deal with Richie. Like, I would rather endure Pete drooling on my shoulder than having to fight with you, Richie. So, okay, we'll just take it. We'll just take it."
Yeah. While he's driving, too. It's just so funny.
Right? Yes. While we're talking about the dialogue, there's one little dialogue detail that's similar to the, like, "Thank you, Jeff, thank you, chef" bit, which is when Richie and Carmi are leaving, Uncle Jimmy is shaking Richie's hand and calls him Richard. And I thought that was so great, because throughout the rest of the episode earlier, we see him call him Rick, and he knows it gets on his nerves, and he does it so intentionally. But there's this moment of like respect between them, like, yeah, no, like we like to play around with each other, but like, thank you, Richard, for coming. It's a little moment of respect.
Well, and I love that Richie returns it with James. Like, they are both calling each other their formal name that neither one of them goes by and probably hates. It's just, it's so good that it's slightly more respectful than what they had been doing before, but it's still not fully respectful, and it just encapsulates their whole dynamic.
Yep. Oh, it's so great. It's really great. All right, let's give out some awards. The first category is Top Chef. Who is getting this award this week?
I'm going to give it to Marcus for making some killer chocolate cake.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to reach into my screen and take a bite. It looked so good. It looked so good. That was the whole narrative arc of that is just satisfying. Especially that shot of him like so focused, zesting his orange above the cake. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
the level of
Yeah.
detail, Marcus. I see you, man. So good. My choice for this award this week is I'm giving this award to Richie for his duct tape persistence. I
Oh,
love
it's so
those little
good.
background shots. And what's extra great is that he's talking in a scene that happens right after they're fighting over the shirt and the hot dog blow up. And there's you see it in the background in one of the shots that come later, and it's all wrinkly. And you're like, okay, he did not. Okay, that's funny enough, honestly, that it's all wrinkly because it's clearly been deflated and like shoved into the car. But then there's a scene that comes right after, couple moments later, and you just see this T-shirt duct taped to the hot dog blow up. It's so good. It's so good. And it's just kind of looming in the background. They don't really call attention to it. They don't cut to it. It's just in the background. And the show trusts that you will see. You will see and you will find it hilarious.
And we do see, and we do find hilarious.
Yes.
And every time they cut back to when like Carmi's behind the table, like prepping or doing whatever, and you see the inflatable hot dog behind him, it's hilarious every time.
Mm-hmm. It's so Richie too. It's such a Richie move. And the duct tape's not even like very like symmetrical on both sides.
Yeah,
Or
so
no,
bad.
it's just thrown on there.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yep.
Like you said, it perfectly shows who Richie is, and he found a way to achieve his vision. So
Yep.
props to him.
Yep. All right. The next category is Achievement in Chaos. Who is getting this award for what moment?
I would like to give this to Uncle Jimmy for shockingly being okay with a bunch of children being drugged at his house.
They're all like piled in a heap too, you know? Like,
right?
There's a couple of shots of like just like arms flail like lying haphazardly on the ground, and like shoes and like splatters of food around, and like ketchup, mustard everywhere. And you're like, this is if anyone walked into this party, immediate arrest.
Right? Also, like, where are the other parents of these children? Did they just drop all of the children off and Uncle Jimmy is like the only parent there? I don't know. I was very confused about the logistics, but he was cool with it. So
Yep.
Way to go, Uncle Jimmy.
Yeah, plot twist. All the other parents were like, oh, thank God. Same reaction. Just like, oh, this is great. We should do this next time. Oh, I am giving this award, Achievement in Chaos, to just Fock in general. Fock throughout this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Achievement in Chaos.
Yeah. Talking about grandma's toilet seat cover and donuts is pretty chaotic. That's quite a combination that I don't know, I wouldn't have arrived at just on my own.
Nope. His creative brain really thinks outside the box. Okay, next category is Spiciest Line. Who's getting this award for what line that they deliver?
I'm going to give it to Carmi when, in the beginning, when he's arguing with Richie, he just says, name a cohort.
Yes.
It's great.
Oh, it's so good. It's such a great way to show how like siblings argue too. Like,
yeah,
just let me back you in a corner. Like, you can't see. So I was right. My choice for this category is to Richie for when he says, "What kind of asshole is going to put ketchup on a hot dog?" And I had an existential crisis. I was like, I do that. Okay, let's reassess.
Yeah. Right. I mean, to be fair, you're not from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
You probably weren't raised in an area that has very strong feelings about what goes on a hot dog.
Yes.
So you might be able to get a pass. If you were from Chicago, then that would be just an unpardonable sin, I'm sure. But you might get a little pass.
Yep. So it's just dissing the rest of the country. It's fine. All of us are here like, me? I do. I love the rest of that sequence though. Carmi's like, children.
Children.
And Richie's like, yeah, child assholes. Like, okay. Okay, Richie. Okay, looking ahead, what are you excited to see?
Just more of this goodness. I'm just excited to continue hanging out with this ragtag group of teammates, co-workers, family, and see what other shenanigans we can get into.
Yeah, what other situations can we find ourselves in? Yes.
Yeah.
I am intrigued how they're going to pay off this $300,000. There's that whole conversation that Carmi has with Uncle Jimmy where he's like, all right, so $298,000 left. Oh, wait, no, $298 plus $50. Okay, got it, for shipping and charges. Yeah, this feels like an impossible task. How are they going to do it? I don't know. But that is a large sum of money, and either the business is going to just totally take off, or we're going to find ourselves doing more fun tasks for Uncle Jimmy. So I'm excited to see what they do there. And then Ira, I want to see Ira in the next episode. I hope to see more of him. He's such a fascinating human, and the way that he's reacted to receiving his role, in the French Brigade, in some of the previous episodes. Just, he's such a presence, and yet I feel like we haven't gotten to learn much more about him. So I hope he's our next target for the next episode to focus on. We shall see.
Yeah, we sure will.
Yep. All right. Any other last thoughts before we wrap? We hit them all.
I think we hit them all, Perfect. It's great. I'm happy. Jen, we are also halfway through the first season.
I know. I feel like we're just getting started, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I can see we could play this out season after season after season. Like, we've learned a lot about the characters, and yet I feel like there's so many more layers to unfold and peel back with each of them. And then, let alone, let's just put our fun characters that we've now learned about into different situations. Like, there still feels like so much, and I feel like we're just skimming the surface of what could be. So I get it. I get why there's more content that they're going to create for this soon. There's a lot more here. It's hard to believe we're at the halfway point of season
1. Yep. So we will see what the back half of this season has in store for us.
Yep. Indeed. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 4. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of TVNS. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 1. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 4. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at TVNSPod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss episode 5. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again soon.